Hello, everyone. This is Miss Lorette. I know it seems a little weird since I've got my mask on while filming a video here, but I am in my classroom and there have been students in and out of the room. So I will be wearing a mask in today's video, and hopefully it doesn't prove to be too difficult to hear me through it. In this particular section, we're going to be talking about 3.3, which is solving multi-step equations. So in previous lessons, you've learned how to solve one-step equations, two-step equations, and now we're going to solve equations that require more than two steps. So I've broken down this section into multiple lessons. We're only going to focus on integer values today. Integers are the nice countable numbers starting at 0 and then counting up by 1. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And the opposites to the counting numbers. So -1, -2. So we're not going to be looking at things that have fractions. We're not going to be looking at things that have decimals. Those are going to be for future lessons. So you'll want something to write on, something to write with, and possibly a calculator to double check your mental math. Okay, so I like to break things down into repeatable steps where possible. Your teacher, if you have a different teacher, might use fewer or more steps than I have right here. I've broken it down into 4 different steps. When you're dealing with a multi-step equation, the first thing you want to do before you even try to solve it is you want to simplify each side as much as possible. So the first 2 steps that I'm going to list here explain how to simplify. And again, these simplifying steps are as needed. Sometimes you may need to do certain things, sometimes you might not to. It really depends on the equation. So step 1, the first thing we want to look for is if we need to distribute. Now, when we distribute, we're looking for parentheses. So again, if we don't have parentheses in the equation, we don't need to do step 1. But if we do, we must always distribute first. Step 2, we're going to combine like terms. And again, this is if we have any. Maybe we don't have to do this because we don't have any like terms. Like terms are terms that have the same variable factors. So if it's a number that has an x, it can only be added or subtracted with other numbers that have x's. If it's a number by itself, we call those constants. It can only be added or subtracted with constants. And again, these are our simplifying steps. We're not actually solving here, we're simplifying. Once we're done fully simplifying everything that we can simplify, it should create either a 1 or 2-step equation that we've learned how to solve in a previous lesson. So step 3, we're going to undo our constant first by adding or subtracting. And again, this is to both sides of your equation. This is an inverse operation at this point. And the last thing that we're going to do is undo our coefficient by multiplying or dividing to both sides. So these are now the solving steps, where we're using inverse operations to isolate our variable. So hopefully you've got that written down. If you need more time, feel free to pause the video or rewind as needed. And now that we've got those steps, let's actually apply them to solve an equation. So go ahead and copy this equation in your notes. Again, you might want to draw a line down your equal sign. You don't have to, but it's a nice visual separator. And I'm actually going to go through those steps and ask myself, is it something that I need to do? Step 1 said to distribute. Well, when I look at this equation, I don't see any parentheses, so I don't need to do that. Step 2 was to combine like terms. I have a minus b and a plus 8b. They both have b's. I need to combine them. Remember that a variable without a number in front really means there's an invisible 1 there. You may want to write that in just as a reminder. It's not a 0, it's a -1. So I need to combine -1 with +8. If you do that, you should get +7. Again, if you're typing it in the calculator, it should know to subtract for you. We should know to subtract at this point in the game, though, because we've got different signs here, and I matched the sign of the larger number. So if I subtract, I'm going to get 7, and I'm going to make it a positive. I also need to include my variable on it. At this point, I'm done simplifying. I can't combine these two numbers because they're not alike. This has a variable, this doesn't. So at this point, it's a 2-step equation. I'm going to undo my constant first. It's understood to be a +3, So I need to subtract it from both sides. That's going to give me 21 on the left, and I still have that positive 7b on the right. This number, which is touching the variable, is understood to be being multiplied with that variable. So the inverse of multiplying is to divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 7 and get a final answer of 3. So I achieved my goal. I isolated my variable. Now, when you're doing these, if you're unsure if you got the correct answer, you can do what's known as a check. You may have learned how to do checks in previous lessons. I'll quickly go over how to do a check in just this particular example. So underneath where we got an answer here for this equation, or maybe off to the side, you'll want to leave some space to complete a check, and I'm just going to rewrite the answer that we got up here somewhere so I can reference it. When you're doing a check, you're replacing the variables with the answer that you got, and then following order of operations to simplify where we have operations. This 24, which is by itself on the left, we're not doing anything to that 24. It's going to stay at 24. We're not solving. We're not using inverse operations, okay? We're simplifying the right-hand side using PEMDAS, and if we get a 24 over here, which matches the 24 on the left, we got the right answer. If we don't get a 24, something's gone wrong. So the 24 equals will come down for the ride in every single step. The first thing I need to do is substitute, just like when we evaluate algebraic expressions. Anywhere that I see a b, I'm going to replace it with a 3. And again, that 8, which is touching the variable, means it's being multiplied. So I want to make sure that I'm showing that operation when I substitute. I don't have any parentheses, so I don't need to worry about my parentheses step. I don't have any exponents, so I can skip that step as well. I do have multiplication here, so based off of orders of operations, we need to multiply and divide first from left to right. So I'm going to multiply this positive 8 with a positive 3 and bring down everything else that I haven't done anything with yet. 8 times 3 is going to give me a positive 24. At this point, it's just adding and subtracting. And again, we do that left to right. So I'm going to do 3 minus 3 first, which gives me 0. I bring down that plus 24. And now I'm going to add and get 24. I'm getting the same answer on both sides. That means that I found the correct answer. So I encourage you that if you are not sure if you got the correct answer for an equation, do a check, substitute, and follow order of operations to see if you get the same number on both sides. All right, so let's do another one. My line's a little crooked. Let me try again. I'm going to draw my line down my equal sign. It's a nice visual separator. And in this equation, I do need to do step 1, which says to distribute. I know I need to distribute because I see parentheses. I'm going to take this 8, which is touching the parentheses, and remember, when we distribute, we multiply. So I'm going to do 8 times 1b. Again, there's nothing in front of that b. There's really an invisible 1. And then 8 times a negative 6. There is a minus sign in front of that 6. It's a negative. 8 times 1b is going to give me 8b. 8 times negative 6 is going to give me a negative 48. Now I need to ask myself, do I have any like terms to combine? Well, I can't combine anything on the right-hand side. This has a variable and this doesn't. So I skip that step. Now it's a 2-step equation that I can solve. I need to undo my constant first, which is the negative 48. To undo it, I add it to both sides. Okay, and again, you can work this out without a calculator. I'm just going to use a calculator super fast just to get my answer. When you type it in, you want to make sure that you're typing that the 96 is a negative and that we're then adding 48. I got a negative 48 as my difference. Your calculator should be subtracting them because the signs are different. Last but not least, I need to get rid of this number that's touching the variable. Again, that implies multiplication. So I want to do the inverse. I want to divide. Negative 48 divided by 8 should leave us with a negative 6. And again, if you weren't sure if this was the correct answer, you could do a check. You would just want to do everything in parentheses first. So you would do negative 6 minus 6, which would give you a negative 12, and then you would multiply negative 12 with 8 to give you a negative 96. All right, here's another one. Go ahead and copy this one down. Again, you may want to draw a line down your equal sign. Now, this one in particular, just with the way that it's formatted, I've seen students every so often, they will try to combine these two numbers here before they continue to solve. You do not want to do that, okay? You never start by combining like terms if we have parentheses. Always distribute first. We're distributing the thing that's touching the parentheses, which in this case is the negative 2. Notice when I include this number for my distributive property, I'm not just looking at the 2, but I'm looking at the sign to the left of it as well. I need to make sure that I keep that in mind when I multiply. This negative 8 out front is just going to come down for the ride. I haven't done anything with it yet. And then I multiply. Negative 2 times 5b is going to give us a negative 10b. Negative 2 times a negative 6, again, this 6 is also negative, that's going to give us a positive 12. Really important that we're careful with our signs here. There's no more parentheses, so I'm done with step 1. Now I look to see if I have any terms to combine. I have a constant of negative 8 and a constant of positive 12. I can combine those. This negative 10b is just going to come down for the ride. And negative 8 plus 12, the signs are different. So if you typed it in a calculator, it should take their difference. Or you could do it mentally. That should give us a positive 4. And I bring down my equals 84. There's no more like terms to combine. I can't combine these. This has a b and this doesn't. So it's a two-step equation I can now solve. I undo my positive constant first by subtracting it once from each side. That's going to leave me with negative 10b equals 80. 84 minus 4 is 80. This number touching the variable implies multiplication. So again, the inverse of multiplying with negative 10 is to divide by negative 10. 80 divided by negative 10 gives me negative 8. Here's my final answer. And again, if you weren't sure if you got it right, you could replace this variable up here with the number. You would multiply first in your parentheses, subtract in parentheses, multiply that result with the negative 2 first, and then combine with the negative 8 last. Remember, you would follow order of operations when doing a check. All right. I believe this might be the last one in my slideshow here. And for right now, this is going to be the most complicated one that I will throw at you. One that has 2 sets of parentheses. So again, I'm just going to draw my line down my equal. You don't have to do that. And when we see parentheses, always distribute first. The thing that's touching the first parentheses is a negative. Remember that that's really a negative 1. So that's what I'm distributing. That's what I'm multiplying with each of these terms inside. Multiplying with a negative 1 is actually quite easy. You don't even need a calculator. All this is going to do is change the sign of the things inside. So instead of a negative 5n, it's going to be a positive 5n. Instead of a minus 7, it's going to be a plus 7. That's all negative 1 does when you multiply. The second group, I'm distributing a positive 3. So I'm multiplying a positive 3 with each of these numbers. 3 times 3n gives me a positive 9n. 3 times 5 gives me positive 15. Notice when we distribute that we're dropping the parentheses and my terms have to be separated with plus and minus signs. All my parentheses are gone, so I can move on to step 2, which says combine like terms. I have a 5n and a 9n. I can add them together to get 14n. I have a 7 and a 15. I can add them together to get, let's see, what is that? 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Carry the 1, that's going to give us 22. And at this point, I have no more like terms. I can't combine these two because this one has a variable and this doesn't. So it's a two-step. I have to undo my positive constant by subtracting. I do that to both sides. And just to make quick work of this, I'm going to use my calculator. Be careful when you type that in. They should both be negative. So when you do it, you want to write that it's negative 76 minus 22. Your calculator should know to add this. Or if you do it mentally, you'll want to add these numbers. And we match the negative of the things that we're adding. You should get a negative 98. And I'm going to bring down my 14 in. The last thing I need to do is I need to divide, because this 14 is getting multiplied with the variable. So I want to do the inverse and divide. Again, just to make quick work, I'm going to divide it in my calculator, and I got a negative 7 as my quotient. Here's my final answer. I'm just going to double check if that indeed was the last slide, the last example. It was. So again, if you need to pause, rewind, rewatch, that's the benefit of this being a video. I hope that you found these examples helpful, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.